Welcome to With You podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David,
And I'm Tara.
and today we're back together in our home studio.
Yeah. Yeah. What a novelty to be home.
we're finally home, and it's nice to be back, although we left part of our heart in a different state.
In
Yeah.
a different state.
In a different state. Our heart is in a different state, but we're here in our home studio and excited to talk about a topic that I love.
I know. You really do.
It's part of me. It's been part of me since I was little.
Yeah.
And do we need a drum roll or
No, I think we
no?
can just go right there.
Okay, it's play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think play is central to a lot of our being, and it's been from growing up, but also in my profession. It's been an important part.
Yeah. What do you mean in your profession?
So when I first learned to do therapy, I was doing play therapy. And so I got to work at a child study center, and I learned that play was a mechanism for change. And we'll
Hmm.
probably get into all the properties of play later
Yeah.
on. But yeah, it was the language of my therapy process.
Yeah. Well, it was natural for you to find that type of therapy because it seems to come naturally for you.
It does.
It always has. I think your whole family, I think that's one of the first things I noticed about you and your family is that play is a huge part of your language.
Yeah, it's how we
And
do connection. I mean, it started really early on.
yeah.
My deep passion for baseball, playing baseball, watching
Hmm.
baseball was a relationship thing with my grandma.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been central, and it's play, but also
Yeah. It's not
playfulness.
just going to games. It's like how you all talk to each other, how you relate like with laughter and teasing each other. And that was all a really different way of being when I joined your family. My family I would say has a sense of humor.
Hmm.
But play wasn't as integrated into just relationships.
No, it's purposeful. Like when I met your family,
Yeah.
play was purposeful,
Yeah.
exercise was
Yeah.
purposeful,
Well,
everything was
that's my
purposeful.
dad. My
Yeah.
dad is very purposeful. And so even if he told a joke, he's like, I'm going to tell a joke now. Like, because I
I
think
love
we need
that.
to laugh.
That's right.
It wasn't as just just interwoven into
It wasn't a way of being, it was an
a thing to
activity.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it is, but our family, it's always been on both sides, the
Yeah.
Vandertilt side and the
Yeah.
Van Dyke side. It's been a way of
Yeah.
navigating pain and suffering. It's been a way of connecting and kind of humility, even. Like, don't take yourself too seriously because none
Mhm.
of us do.
That's right.
and
Yeah.
and it really helped
Yeah.
because it's like, oh yeah, what we do is important, but we're not always as important as we think we are, and we can be playful around that. I mean, even
Yeah.
like around the dinner table, dad around death, we had
I know
playfulness around
you guys
death.
have some dark humor. That's still something for me to get used to. The dark humor is if you grew up as a funeral director, I guess that's part of comes with the territory and also helpful for survival.
Yeah, well, it's hard if every part of your day is involving death on some level. You either get pretty macabre, or you have to be playful and find jokes. And we did, and yeah, inappropriately so. Uh,
Yeah.
for some
Yeah.
people, for us, it
For
was
you, it's
really,
normal.
really funny.
Yeah, and we're already starting out talking about play in an adult perspective.
Oh yeah,
But I think most people, I mean, I can't speak for most people, but for me, for most of my life, and I think it's true for most people that we think of play as a childish thing.
yeah,
We think of play in terms of childhood and games and playground and that kind of stuff. Do you think that's fair?
yeah. I think that's fair. I think normal human beings think about play as a child activity.
Yeah. And so because of that, I think people think they outgrow it at some point. I think people think, the play was fun when I was a child, but now I have to get serious and I have to pay the bills and I have to, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
think I think there is research done on this that the times an adult laughs in their day
yeah.
is, I should have looked up that study, but it's like minuscule compared to the number of times a child laughs.
Really?
And that leads to a lot of, like, extra stress in our lives and stuff.
Yeah.
So, that's why we thought this was a topic worth discussing
Mhm.
because, I've learned the power of play a lot more by just being in your family, and I think it's a big part of what makes our relationship work.
Yeah.
Um, but I realize that we can all get better at play and realizing that it's not just something that helps relationships function, it's, like, actually necessary for human flourishing and for creativity and for growth, and we'll talk about the benefits of all of that,
Yeah.
but
So when you think about play as a child, like, what were the things you did that were play? So let's just talk about activities first before we get
what we
into
did as
meaning.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
what
what was
was
your play?
Yeah, so for me, I think of when I lived in Africa as a child. I don't have a lot of memories before that, although I think we did a lot of outdoor running around.
Yeah.
But
You were
from the
free
time I
range
was
players.
10, I moved to Africa at the age 9, I think. So that's time to think of what you did as play. I did a lot of imaginative play, like, we played for hours outside, we were just untethered, like, unsupervised, like, I'm sure most kids in the '70s were, but
Yeah.
we were outside, my siblings and I and my cousins with my playmates, and we had a tree fort that my dad and my uncle built in our backyard, and you got to see that
Yeah.
yard,
Yeah. I got to sleep
in
in that.
Kenya.
Oh,
No, no,
no,
no,
in
no, in
Kenya.
Africa. This
Oh,
is
yeah,
when I
that's
was
right.
a child. They made a similar thing, but this was in this peppercorn tree in Kenya.
Oh, that's right.
And so we would climb that tree and sit in that fort and play all sorts of, we'd make up characters and we'd play out scenarios. And I remember one day where we spent the entire day making a Hawaiian luau that we were
Oh,
going to invite the adults to. We dug a pond, we picked local fruit, we made flower necklaces. Like, that was a lot of what we did as play.
wow. That's creative.
Yeah.
How did you know about a luau?
We weren't like at the ends of the earth.
Well, you were. You're basically the opposite side of the earth if you're
Yeah.
in
I
Africa
know, we
from
read books.
oh, well, that's
Yeah.
something that our family did not do as
Yeah.
much was read
We
books.
read a lot of
That makes
books.
sense. We would only
Yeah.
experience what we experienced
Yeah.
and not a lot of reading. But we did too. We played, but it's interesting because
I
you
don't think
play,
that's fair. Your mom is one of the most prolific
yeah,
readers I
so
know.
was
So if
Papa
she's listening,
Vandertil.
you taught these kids to read.
We did
And
read, but I think we fought it when we were little.
yeah, you didn't
Uh,
spend a lot of time sitting around reading.
No,
Yeah.
we were outside as well. So it's interesting you talked about make believe play because
Hmm.
probably that same age, 8, 9, 10, end of middle of elementary to end of elementary, we played and our front porch
Hmm.
was a Coast Guard cutter. And we
Yeah.
played Coast Guard
So that's a ship,
rescue.
like a rescue
Like
ship.
a rescue ship that,
Yeah.
it's kind of a Navy, but it's for
And
only the
it's
coast of
cutter
the
because it cuts
US.
through the ice, right?
Right, it's a iceberg
For people in a
cutter.
different hemisphere, that might be hard to
That's fair.
imagine.
Yeah, so it's a ship that,
Yeah.
breaks up the ice for the lanes of boating,
Across
hauling
the Great Lakes.
cargo across the Great Lakes and up and down the seacoast. And so it kind of protects the U.S. It's the U.S. kind of police force on the water, and it's
Mhm.
called the Coast Guard. And we were a city that was known for Coast Guard.
Mhm.
We were Coast Guard City, USA.
Yeah,
Thank you to President Ford, who is from Michigan. He made us the Coast Guard City, USA. We have a festival. Anyway, that was our growing up.
Yeah.
And so we would play what we kind of knew. We'd go down to the river and the lake and we'd see these big boats. And so then we play search and rescue and we'd role play what we saw and what we imagined happening. And it was relational. Like your luau was
Yeah.
relational. It was
Yeah. Oh,
relational
yeah. Was
of
never by yourself.
no.
And did you do a lot of the classic games too? Did you play marbles and,
Yep.
like, tetherball and
Yep. And
yeah, the
tic or not tic tac toe,
um
the jumping one. Hopscotch.
hopscotch. We
Yeah.
did jump rope a lot in school. We a
Yeah.
lot of jump rope games
I
we
think
played at
I
recess and
think those elementary and Foursquare, you bounce in the
mhm.
ball, you do around the
Yes.
world, all those type of things.
Yeah.
So there
Foursquare got too competitive at school for me.
dodgeball, right?
Dodgeball.
So it's
Yeah.
but developmentally it's interesting because I think you start playing alone when you're little and then playing with your siblings and it's exploring the world.
Yeah.
And then play developmentally shifts into like the rules, like all the games we're talking about,
Yeah.
marbles. There was more fights about the rules about
Right.
marbles or about Foursquare or hopscotch
Yeah.
than there was actually playing. Do you remember
Oh,
that?
yeah, like, you went outside the line, and you'd have to have a discussion and
Yeah.
then mediation.
And I think and that sometimes adults get really upset by all the bickering about rules, but that's actually part of the play of how do we socialize? How do we navigate
Mhm.
rules? How are they established? Do I establish them? Do you? Do we have
Yeah.
joint agreement?
Yeah.
And we see all that on the playgrounds and we see kids navigating that. We saw in Africa, kids were playing, making up games with the
Yeah. We
resources that
saw
they had
them
available.
right, pulling cars made out of a soda bottle and pushing hoops with
Yep.
a stick and
Playing with wheelbarrows in
yeah.
different creative ways. And
Yeah.
it's the thing that I love about that is the creativity of argument about rules and the creativity about taking something and making it something else is is hopeful for like really cognitive development that I
Mhm.
don't get stuck in a specific area, but I can start to try different things on. And I think that's I just love that about
Yeah.
play with these young kids.
You're getting ahead of
Oh,
us.
I'm sorry. I
You're
should
getting into
probably
lecture mode
yeah, yeah,
already.
yeah, yeah.
So
I know.
so
I
the
could talk
I
forever
know,
about the
and I love that,
development
and
of play.
that's where we're going, about the
Yeah,
function
but we're still talking
of it,
about
but we're
our
still like
play.
our games,
Oh,
let's just
yeah.
be playful.
That's right. No, I wanna go to the
And did
development.
you played board games too, right? Like card games and board
Yeah, we
games?
had a problem of competitiveness,
Yeah.
which is like my like most grandmas, I think you as a grandma will be this way,
Okay.
let kids win occasionally.
Yeah.
My grandma, you had to earn the win, and I
My
must
grandma
have
too with Scrabble. Oh my
yeah.
goodness, it was scary to play her in Scrabble.
Ours was Yahtzee and 10,000. It was dice
Yeah.
games rather than Scrabble because none of us could spell really well. There's a whole dyslexic family. So Scrabble
Yeah.
was not a fun because
No.
no one knew if that
Mm,
was the right spelling or not. So Scrabble wasn't our thing,
Yeah,
but
Yahtzee.
Yahtzee, 10,000, and grandma would play and she loved playing games, but there was no letting the children win.
No.
Like
She's
we were little and she
out for
would just be
blood.
like, and I just destroyed you. And she didn't do it meanly, but it was just kind of like, one day you'll win. And we were like, it was delayed gratification in terms of play. But we had board games, we
Yeah.
had
Like
card
in the winter
games.
months, you'd be inside playing things like
Yeah.
that. So, how did that translate to what you see play as now, other than just the relational, like, you know, being a jokester and that kind of stuff? Like, what does play look like, do you think, to
So
you as an
do you
adult?
want
But
me to answer as David, your husband, and just someone talking about play, or as the developmentalist?
let's just be yourself.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I don't know what it means to be myself except for being a developmentalist. Well, I think play is a way, it is a way of,
How would those be different answers, first of
because
all?
I would start talking about play as language,
Right,
and
but,
that's
like,
not a
I'm just talking
normal.
about your experience of play now as an adult, not
My,
your theoretical
yeah.
ideas of
Oh,
what play
interesting.
is.
Yeah. It's hard because I don't know if I can separate them out.
You can. What do you do for fun? You
I
go to baseball
I go to
games.
baseball games.
You
I go kayaking.
go
It's
kayaking.
recreation
Yes.
more than play. Although we'll play games at home.
Yeah.
Used to play video games with the kids when they were younger.
Yeah.
It's kind of entering into play. For me, it's whatever people are doing, I'll enter in to
Yeah.
connect with them. So play really is relational for for me. It's a space to do something together and have
Yeah.
fun. There's a computer on our phones, a computer game that a few of my friends and I play as a way of connecting, and it's nonsense, but it's fun because we can talk about it and we
Mhm.
connect over it, and it gives us an opportunity for intimacy and connection
The
that's
shared
beyond,
experience.
yeah, that's beyond the cognitive. Let's talk about Augustine and Art Holmes and the philosophy of kind of sacred and secular space. That's fun too, but that's different
Yeah,
than,
that's really different than
and
the game you're playing.
and I think the most enjoyable play as an adult for me involves body movement, of doing something, not
Mhm.
just the mental side of it, but a physical side of it. So that's why recreation of going to an event, going to a baseball game. Baseball is the heart. So I played it, and it just is. It's a heart song. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe that, but it just like a tuning fork. Baseball and me vibrate at the same frequency, and
Mhm.
it gives me joy. So I think play also involves joy, like adult play. Is that's not what
Yeah,
we
let's
want to
be
call
careful
that.
how we
Yeah.
Google that. Yeah.
Play
Yeah.
as adults, I think
Yeah.
brings a sense of joy that maybe not other activities, mental activities,
Okay.
conversation do.
Now we're defining it.
Well, that would be that for me. That's what play is.
Yeah.
It's language, and it's a connection to a joy, a playfulness that's not overthinking.
Yeah.
How about for you?
I just don't even know how to follow that because you can't talk about yourself, you have to talk about the idea.
Yeah. Well, okay. So how do we
Yeah.
play? That's what I need.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think let's just go right into properties of play because I mean, it's kinda boring to start with a definition, but I
Yeah,
think we gotta start with kind of a definition and, thinking about this subject. We talk about this subject all the time.
we
We didn't
do.
just pull this out of a hat. We talk about the power of play and how it helps us
Yeah,
in our lives,
playfulness.
playfulness, but, this almost is gonna seem somewhat like a review of a book that we found on this subject that we think will be a good resource if you're interested in this topic as, the ideas of it.
Yeah,
Go back and look. It's called Play by Stuart Brown and Christopher Vaughan, and we'll link to it in the
yeah.
show notes. But so I'll use this definition that I think
Okay.
was out of right. I think
Yeah.
it came out of his book,
Hmm.
and I think we had the same idea. But basically, so properties of play are
Yeah.
apparently purposeless. So it's just like you're doing it for its own sake. You're just whatever that activity is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have an outcome,
Yeah, that's where
right?
games differ, right? So
Mm-hmm.
games are a different type of play, but
Yeah.
play in and of itself, like you climbing in trees and making a luau, that
Yeah.
it's
Well, I feel
it's
like almost everything I do has a purpose or an outcome. So that's why play is not as natural for me, but
yeah,
it's the process part that is
yeah,
the play, right?
yeah. I think it is the process,
Yeah.
and there doesn't have to be any goal. It can just be
Yeah.
like
It can be sort
putting
of
your
look
feet in this,
aimless
building a sandcastle that's going to fall apart. But there's something about the process of the sand,
of just
and
touching the sand
that's what
and
I
the
did a
yeah.
lot of,
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
when I think about a play, both as adult and kid. There's something tactile,
Yeah.
enjoyable about making sandcastles, and I like those drippy ones
Yeah.
where you get the wet
Yeah.
sand
You spend a
and
lot of time on the beach.
yeah, and so I think
Yes.
that's the purposeless, apparently
Yeah, apparently. And it's
purposeless.
not. And that's
Yeah,
what we're talking about too. It's definitely got a purpose for our brains and our relationships. So another property of
yeah.
play is that it's voluntary. And I wouldn't have thought to put that in the list, but that's important
It is important
because I
because
feel like
do you want to play? Do you want to play? Do you want to play?
yeah,
Hey,
and
do
I
you want to
think
play?
there's times when people will think they're being playful, but the other
Oh
person,
yeah,
like if somebody says something that feels kind of hurtful to that person, I say, "What's wrong? I'm just playing."
yeah,
Then that's not play. If the other person isn't feeling they were
yeah.
voluntarily entering into it.
I'm feeling a little convicted because we have some of our kids living at home,
Yeah.
and I start playing with them, and I don't invite them to play, specifically
Yeah,
Abigail.
sometimes I call you on that.
Yeah, you're like,
You
I
can
don't
back
think
off
she
now.
I don't think she wants to play. And you're right that there has to be not only voluntary, but voluntarily entering in when
Right.
there's a bid to play.
Right.
Because I think I make bids to play with you,
Yeah.
and it's only fun and enjoyable when you take the bid
Right, right.
and voluntarily
If
enter
people
in.
are playing together, there has to be a voluntary
Yeah.
togetherness,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's essential
Yeah.
for play. There's an inherent attraction,
Yeah,
which
baby.
okay, let's not get weird. uh, so to the activity, I'm guessing is what that means.
I don't know.
There's
I,
a freedom. I'm just going to keep moving because
you're just talking
you
right over.
just
I have a lot of things to say about this inherent attraction.
yeah, but let's just stay on task. This is like a microcosm of our relationship.
I know Tara's
Um,
wanting to stay on task, and I'm making a bid for play.
we we have a long way to go.
Okay, yeah, just keep going. Inherent attraction. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so we should have read that chapter. But I mean, I'm assuming, and it makes sense that it means like it's
Enjoyable.
an enjoyable
Yeah.
activity. It's something it sounds fun, you want to enter into.
Yeah, because if you don't like something, then it's really hard to be play.
Yeah, then it's work.
Yeah,
It's work
and
to try to have fun, and
or
that's I've been in
obligation.
plenty of those situations where you're working to try to you want to like it.
Yeah,
It's not
you work
fun.
so hard and you
Like me
cannot
in
find.
running, I'm a wannabe runner.
Oh,
It's never been fun.
yeah, there's nothing inherently pleasing about running.
Not for me.
Me neither.
Okay, so another property of play is the freedom from time. So feeling not bound by like an end
Yeah.
time or feeling restricted.
And I think as adults, this is what they talked in the 90s about flow, like Michael Jordan, and you're doing something where time and space, it's just like you're in a groove and you don't realize it. And work can be play like that.
Yeah.
You can get into a flow state of something you
Yeah.
enjoy doing.
And that's part of the next thing, the diminished consciousness,
Yeah.
like the just not being conscious of not being self-conscious, not being worried about time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or worried about the performance.
Yeah.
It's just you're doing it and you're immersed in it.
Yeah. Which I can see you doing, dripping your little
Oh, yeah.
sandcastles.
Time just disappears.
Yeah.
Well, and the same as at
Yeah.
a baseball stadium.
Yeah.
Like some people feel it is an eternity, like the games go on forever.
And you're
And I'm
like, it's
always
over
sad when it's
already?
done. It's just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
We just got here 7 hours ago. How can the game be done?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a good
well,
example.
the other one that's interesting to me in properties is improvisational potential, because I like this a lot.
Yeah.
That it's not bound by rules,
Yeah. You love that. You love that.
that the rules are
Yeah.
suggestions and there's an opportunity to play outside of them or play with them.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure you enjoy that as much as I do.
I think that's fair to say. I like some sort of structure and boundaries, and it's fun to play with them,
Yeah.
but not as fun as it is for you.
No, I was going to tell, it's always nice to talk on the podcast because there's things I remember I haven't told you. We were talking at the school in leadership of like, what can we do for a retreat? And I suggested improv training
Oh,
as a
no.
group of psychologists, counselors, and family therapists.
Yeah.
That got shot down so fast
Yeah.
because it's scary, like working outside of the rules and
Mhm.
putting yourself out there in a way that you don't know if it's going to be okay or not
Yeah.
is really scary. But I
Yeah.
think it's emblematic of lacking that ability to play. We're so self-conscious,
Yeah.
so worried about, am I doing the right thing, that
Yeah.
it constricts us.
Yeah.
And this improvisational potential is this freedom to, man, you can say anything and try anything and it's going to be okay. There's no
Not
judgment
necessarily.
here.
Not necessarily. I've been to improvs where everybody got real uncomfortable. But I see what you're saying because it is one of the reasons probably why adults feel less free to play because there's a lot more consciousness of self,
Yeah.
a lot more worry that they're doing it wrong or that it seems frivolous to spend the time playing.
Yeah.
It's not
What might you
purposeful.
think
Yeah.
about me doing this?
Right.
Now, the nice thing is you found my playfulness attractive. So
Well,
that
I
was
knew I
lucky.
needed more of it in my life. So we got that going for us.
That's right. And then kind of the last, it's not the last property, but the last property that Brown and Vaughan talked about was a continuation of desire. And this is the idea of, man, I want to do that
So
again,
you
or I
wanna
want to,
keep doing it. It's not
yeah,
like, "Oh, I'm glad that's done."
yeah.
It's "Ooh,
Tick that
glad
off the
that's over."
box, and now we're never going to do that again.
Yeah.
But that's where kids are like, again, again,
Yeah,
again,
like when
like
you
in
give them a
play.
piggyback ride
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
doing it for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, or flipping the kids or whatever it
Yeah.
is, there's this kind of activity that they enjoy,
Yeah.
and it kind of violates. So we were on a walk yesterday morning and ran into a couple that we knew and their little kid, and playing peekaboo. He could have played peekaboo with me all day
Yeah.
long. And you finally said, David, let these nice people go. 'Cause, and I was also lost in time playing
Yeah.
peekaboo and my face as a toy,
Yeah.
for this young child of like eyebrows, and it's just a lot of fun. But that desire to continue and not getting exhausted, but it goes, all of these kind of build because there's not a purpose. The purpose is being present with each other, and so there's a potential of trying lots of different things, and what gives you joy doing it over and over again is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, why wouldn't we wanna do that?
Why wouldn't we? Well, because we worry what other people think, and
Yeah.
that there's these implicit messages of what's okay to be an
Right,
adult.
and what we need to spend our time doing, and
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I tell a lot of people. Like, good therapists are willing to break rules, and
Certain rules.
certain rules. I mean, there's the ethics that you may not
Yeah,
violate,
yeah, stay within the ethics.
staying within
Let's
the
be
ethics.
clear.
But like families have implicit rules of, you can get a sense of they're not talking about something, and us being bold enough to speak what is really being worked hard, not being said, has been a career. But there's a playfulness to it of like, it's not enjoyable, but it
Yeah,
is moving beyond the previous kind of structure to try something new. And
yeah,
play is about trying something new without serious consequences.
yeah.
That's what we're
That
getting into the
I
next thing.
it is.
Yeah.
That brings to mind a time I used that principle in parenting. Um,
What?
yeah,
Oh,
because I felt I was getting into a rut with our kids, and they were all kind of elementary, maybe the oldest one was junior high. And I was in that sort of parenting pattern that everybody knows, that you feel like all I am is a referee.
mm.
All I am is saying, no, you can't do that. No, you gotta, no, you can't have that to eat. Yes, you got to go to bed now. Like
Yeah.
you just get in this pattern where it feels like this isn't fun for any of us
Right.
because I'm just telling them what they can and can't do.
You're a referee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it felt it was really wearing me down, and I think it was wearing the kids down. And so I think it was actually my mom who gave me this idea. I was talking to her about, like, it just feels like kind of a drag, the way
Uh-huh.
my relationship is with them. And she said, you gotta surprise them. You gotta change it up. You gotta completely, like just blow them away with something new. And so I picked them up early from school, like signed them out early.
Yeah.
And first of all, their reaction as they come into the office and mom's waiting for them, they're very
Uh-oh.
like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?
We're in
Something's wrong."
trouble.
And I took them to a park. It was a really lovely day, and I had bought like sketchbooks and crayons and colored pencils and a nice blanket to lay on, and I took them to a park, and they were still really on edge, like, "What's going on?" And I had
Who's dying?
snacks. I know. Like, "Do you have something really scary to tell us?" And you're but I just, like, I just kept s "No, we're just gonna spend the rest of the afternoon in this park," and we drew, and we ate snacks, but they kept saying, like, "Why are you being so nice to us?"
Oh, no.
I mean, that's when you realize you're in a bad place,
Yeah, that's
like,
a
just
bad
with
system.
but it was so fun, and it did shake things up, and it kinda just reset our
Yeah.
relationship, and it made them realize, like, we can just relax together with they're like, "Do you want me to draw something particular?" "Nope. You do whatever you want."
But
So,
that free play is really hard. I mean, we kind of squish it out of our kids in the school system,
yeah.
in church, in
Yeah.
family. It's like, behave a certain way, and we squish the
Yeah.
creativity or the
Well, I think
freedom.
that's what got us there because our life was so regimented, You
Yeah.
get up, you eat breakfast, you get ready for school. When I pick them up for school, we got to quick have a snack, do our homework, get back in the car to go to sports practice, get back from sports practice, take a shower, it was just
Yeah.
like there wasn't time
Yeah.
for freedom.
Yeah.
And so it was just building some space for freedom.
and the things aren't as important. So the things that we thought were really important rules
Yeah.
that were taking away from freedom and space
Yeah.
weren't that important. I mean, one of the things I always worry about some of our stories that we tell on here, but um,
Oh,
we
no.
weren't too worried about attendance records and being
I think
able
we got
to.
there. I think we
We
were.
were at the
Most of
beginning.
their
Our poor
I
firstborn.
know. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, honey. We learned from our mistakes with you. So your other siblings should kind of appreciate you more. But we realized missing a class or missing a day at school and
That
going
sometimes
to
the
the.
benefits were outweighing the risks
Yeah,
of missing a quiz or something.
which I think is the difference between parenting and grandparenting as we're starting to enter this of like, oh yeah, all that stuff we can look back on with perspective of like, oh, that wasn't it. We were caught up in something that we have perspective now as the next generation and being able to speak in. I think that's the wisdom that multi generations talk about is this
Yeah.
kind of playfulness of as we get older, it's like, oh, we go back to play. I mean, like us talking about play again is like, yeah, that structure is important, but the rules, when they constrict so much, it squishes the life out. And you were smart enough to notice it, which I just think is so
Well, I
amazing.
noticed it every day. It just took me a long time to say I can choose to do something different.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing because you feel so caught up in the requirements of all the things you've agreed to do, being in
Yeah.
the school system and the things we've signed up for. So,
And I think having being on the same page as a couple, like I was fine. I'm like, yeah, I don't care about the rules that we were able to
I'm going to just
support.
say, like, actually,
Oh man, don't
because
break
you
the
are,
myth.
no, you are that way with a lot of things. But I think you felt the same way about they need to show up for school. They need to show up for
Well,
all their,
showing up and doing the relationship, yeah,
yeah. But
that's
I think we were
non-negotiable.
both there. I don't think you were in favor of them skipping school ever.
No,
Um,
but when you said the idea, it was like, yeah, I think I
yeah,
was attuned to like, let's
yeah,
do that together. And that's what I mean. I think as parents of needing to be on the same
yeah.
page about those things, because
Well,
otherwise that can be then a whole nother thing.
yeah, yeah.
So
And that's a whole other thing of how you parent together with the same rules. So, talking about the properties of play and how we've kind of broken some patterns, what is the purpose of it? Like a lot of what helps us see play differently and the importance of it is
yeah,
knowing that there are benefits for adults, not just benefits, not just like, oh, if you exercise, you'll have some benefits. It's like essential,
yeah.
actually.
Well, and I think I'll start with the easiest ones for that people think about. It's kind of a bridge of neuro and kind of cognitive, like doing Sudoku or doing what's the thing that we do every morning? See, my memory is crap, but
The Wordle, the like,
Wordle
yeah.
and the connections and all the New York Times kind of bing.
Yeah, crosswords
Yeah,
and
that
yeah.
those are little activities
Mhm.
that take us out of our daily life and there's research to show that's really helpful in forming new connections in our brain and streamlining other ones that are really important. And so I think brain development,
Yeah.
neurodevelopment, there was a myth back in the day developmentally that neural development just happened in kids and when they got
And then
through teenagers it
it
stopped
ended.
and everything was pruning after that, like
Yeah.
you're just losing everything.
Yeah.
And it's not the
Yeah.
case, and play
And that's a
is
hopeful thing,
a
right?
piece for that. Yeah, it's exciting, but it's like the thing that gets pruned first is play, and play can actually be regenerative, and there's
Mhm.
some pretty good um neuroscience about how that connections
Like
both
actually growing and growing
growing
your
gray
brain,
matter.
building new connections and pathways in your brain.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if you're using creativity, if you're using play, it's going to develop those centers. If you're not, the pruning does happen. The
Yeah.
Hebs theorem is
Use
if
it or
you
lose it.
use it or lose it.
Sorry.
And this is how it feels when I get there first and
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the ones I get excited about is the aging brain as we think about ours. Play is really important in terms of the structure and the function of
Mhm.
our neural
Yeah.
connections. What are the things that get you excited about adult play? play as an adult.
What I've learned recently
In
is
reading
that
the
it
book.
nurtures our creativity and our cognitive flexibility, which is part of what you were saying
Yeah.
about the neural pathways. But like in instances in schools and in workplaces,
Hmm.
play can bring out really new ways of doing things, new ideas for problem solving. So helping us be creative because we can get really stuck on sort of one very linear way of doing things. And
Yeah.
play can be a lot more non-linear, which opens up creative ideas.
Yeah, and
So,
there's a balance of it. I didn't tell you this either. Another piece of
okay.
information. I got to work this morning, and there was a coffee mug in my mailbox, and it was, and I thought I was cool, and now I'm a grandpa. And the mug. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a play. It's like people
Yeah.
interacting, teasing, wordplay. It changes the work environment
Mhm.
from something that is like a drain
Yeah.
and drab to, oh, we can have fun and mess around. One time on the mezzanine, it was quiet and there was four of us, and we took two of the office chairs and we had races. The mezzanine is a square, and so I was pushing the dean,
Oh
and
dear.
we took some corners rather hard.
Uh,
But they were like, we would have never thought to do this, and I'm
oh,
like,
you
man,
think?
that's weird because they're rolly chairs, and we have like a lap that we could do.
So that brings us to the next one. You think it strengths sorry, I cannot talk today. Strengthens relationships. Play
Yeah,
definitely is a binder for
yeah,
relationships.
doing it together.
Yeah.
If you're playing at someone's expense, then it destroys
Yeah,
that
and that's
relationship.
the voluntary
Yeah,
aspect
yeah.
of play.
But it does. I mean,
Yeah.
when we play together, I know we're in better places in our
Mhm.
marriage when we can be playful with each other, when we
Even when we're
get
stressed
out.
out about something, we
Yeah,
can be playful about it.
yeah, and
Mhm.
it's helpful in trust and kind of, oh, we're in this together. It's not as life and death threatening, and
Yeah.
we'll be okay. And it's good to laugh.
Yeah, and like you said before, not taking yourself too seriously. So it
Hmm.
puts you on kind of a different plane with people.
And this last one is connected to the previous three. It's a stress relief of
Mhm.
like we notice blood pressure,
Yeah, so it's
breathing,
actually that's a health benefit if it brings down your stress hormones,
yeah,
like, and
cortisol.
yeah.
Now, how would you think about play around childbirth?
Oh, man.
Because
That's a
that's a
whole other podcast.
but there's ways probably to be playful in
Of
the birth
course. Yeah,
process.
in anything. In I mean, yes, in any
Yeah.
life
I mean,
situation
remember the
that
puppets I made out of the gloves, the blowing
No,
them
you
up, draw
did not.
faces. Hi, Tara.
No, you did not. That's a mind picture.
Yeah, that would be something, but
No. No, but
there's
yeah, in any hard situation, play can be a stress reliever and just breaking the ice of the tension or whatever's in the room and making things feel lighter, making people feel closer, having a shared, experience that's not heavy.
yeah.
It has a lot of benefits that way.
I think for us, the playfulness of like improv, back to improv and stress relief of saying yes and, because I mean, our initial process of doing this was very, very different, and it created some stress for both of us of like, this is not what I want it to be. This is not what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And finding a playful way that we could both give and do this together. And you came up with, let's say yes to each other. And it worked a lot
Yeah.
that we built a story together, and it created much more enjoyable
Yeah.
time doing
And
this.
that's a principle of improv, which we actually are going to talk about in depth in another episode. So that'll
That's a
be fun
teaser. Yeah.
because I will never do comedy improv. I
Oh,
promise you
come
that. I will
on.
never do it.
Maybe we can bring the cameras, and you and I can do just an
I will
improv class
never.
for
I
everyone.
I greatly admire the people who do that. I do a lot of things to get out of my comfort zone. That one for me
Oh
is
yeah.
too far.
Okay.
Um, but I do admire the principles of it, and I see how that makes things work in a
Yeah.
group situation, and I think it's fascinating. And you said your staff don't want to do it, but you have done that with your students because
Correct.
it's a great way for them to be okay with being uncomfortable and to read the room and to listen to what the other person is saying. And all
Yeah.
of that is kind of playful, but also really necessary relationship skills.
Yeah. And telling a story together
Yeah.
rather than negating the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. So we'll talk about
We
that,
will do that in
and
depth.
we'll have a special guest
Yes,
from
we
my
will.
childhood.
Yes, we will. It will be that'll
So,
be
oh,
fun.
I'm really
I'm looking
nervous.
forward to
I'm
that,
not.
although I just don't even know if I'll get a word in with the two of you.
Yeah. And
That'll be fun.
it'll probably have an explicit rating for
I
or
hope not.
yeah.
I hope it's family friendly. That's what I'm always hoping for, guys.
Yeah, you do a
So,
mostly a good job there.
okay, so I thought this was really interesting in the book, where he talked about the different types of adult play and the like.
I'm sorry, I am just a juvenile. Every time you say adult play, I wanna giggle.
Okay, you can giggle. That's fine. But he lists out these different basically like what kind of play you're drawn to.
Yeah,
So I'll list through them. And I mean, when I read through these, I can immediately identify like your top two, what I think. So
okay,
maybe you should tell me
alright.
and my top few. And I think it's pretty obvious. Even anybody just listening just to this episode probably can already kind of pick out
Yeah, they know
where we
us.
land on these. So and you all know some of all of these. And I would so for the first one
Did you put
is
them in order of my characteristics?
no. Why? What are you saying?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, this is how they're listed.
Alright.
Um, the Joker.
Yep.
So that's the person who loves nonsense, wordplay, pranks, playing jokes,
Yeah,
telling
that
jokes. I
I
think
resemble that
I'd say
remark.
you fall into that category.
I do.
Yeah.
I
You've been known
enjoy
for pranks since your childhood
oh, yeah,
and through
and
college
yeah.
and even recently.
Yeah, on the mezzanine. So whenever anybody
When you
gets
say
pranked
on the mezzanine,
on the
I think you need
mezzanine.
to explain that. It's just a strange floor level at Wheaton
Yes, the
College.
building where I teach, there's a floor in between the first and second floor that's called the mezzanine, and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect
Uh,
metaphor for Christianity and psychology because it's hard to find, hard to get away from. But it's called the mezzanine, and
Yeah.
that's our floor where all the
Where
psychology
all the crazy
people,
stuff
yeah,
happens, as you can tell. You might find people racing in chairs around the corners
that's
and
right.
playing pranks on each other.
And everybody knows that I tend to enjoy a good playful prank with people.
Mhm.
And so whenever anything happens on the mezzanine, uh,
It gets pinned on you.
I am the first to be blamed. And
And I
I
think
get
you like it that
I
way.
get a lot of credit for creative things that I had nothing to do with, and I'm just like, I don't know what.
Hmm.
But I think the Joker is also playing with words to try to play with meaning, and so it's
Yes.
not just like getting a laugh,
It's
but
not like
it's
just the
changing the perspective.
jester.
Right.
I know a lot of people who are really good with playing with words, and I find that so fascinating. They just get a kick out of like using words in different ways, and it's a playful way to use language to kind
Yeah.
of make people think differently.
And people use like a certain idiom or word, and I respond to that word. But in
Mhm.
English, it's wonderful because it might have 27 different meanings, and you can respond to the other
Mhm.
meaning, and they're like, "Oh, that's not what I meant." And then you can spend some time interacting around meaning that was intended and playfulness. I enjoy it a lot. So yes, I think
Yeah,
I
I
will
think
take the
that
moniker
fits.
the Joker.
Okay, and so the next one is the kinesthete. How do you say that? It's like an
I don't know. That
athlete, sort
sounds
of kinetic.
yeah.
Somebody who uses their body. Like Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, Uncle
The
Dick, yep,
bodily.
and he could
What do you call
dance and
that?
move.
Slapstick
Yeah,
kind of the Three
comedy.
Stooges, that kind of comedy. But not
Charlie
just that. It's just kind of
Chaplin,
using gestures and movement
yeah,
in a playful way.
embodied, yeah, and that you see that happen
Yeah,
in
it could even be like
pratfalls.
facial expressions, like
Yeah,
yeah.
and so there that I don't think that's me. I don't think that's you either.
No.
But
No, I don't think
Dick
that.
Van Dyke is a good example
Yeah.
of that.
The explorer.
Oh,
So I find that interesting that that's put in a category of play, but it's I think saying that so people who travel and love new places and experiences as a way to be outside their normal life, they get a lot of joy and you
Yeah,
know?
I
Yeah.
think probably I would probably term it the adventurer.
I would say I kind of fit in
I
that
think you
category.
do, like, you have a serious adrenaline addiction.
Well, I'm always seeking new experiences and
You are, and you
yeah.
get joy from it. It's
Yeah.
like, "Let's try that," and I'm like, "I don't think that's a good idea."
I know, like, when I went skydiving for the first time
Oh,
and you were
man.
really
No.
wanted to have the kind of relationship where you could tell me I couldn't do it, like, where you
Yeah,
could say no.
but that's not our
It's
relationship.
not, and you could see I really wanted to do it, and when I was you came the first time, you didn't come the subsequent times,
No,
but
I thought that was
when
a
you
bad.
saw how much joy and spark I had from the anticipation of it, from doing it, and afterwards, you're like,
Yeah,
"Do it as
I
you
love.
gotta do that if it makes you that happy."
Yeah, and support, I mean, support, it doesn't have to be something I did, although I wanted to do it with you
You
because I
you
saw how
didn't
much
want
joy.
to.
Well,
You
I
thought you
was
should offer, and
I yeah,
you
I
were
was
sweating,
it
and
was that was a bad day. I was like, I just told myself, I am going to go with her because she
yeah,
loves it so much.
yeah.
And I did start to sweat and feel a little dizzy and sick. And you're like, honey, you will be miserable and you'll make it miserable for me.
Yeah,
And so
don't come.
don't come. And I'm like, praise Jesus. And I think I stayed home and
You
you
did stay
drove
home.
to Hinkley.
You didn't come any of the times I took the kids. You're
No.
like, I've seen it. I don't need to be part of it."
Yeah, but it's good to have different play styles as adults because that gives your children a wider menu of
Mhm.
things to explore and learn. And as we know, Piaget thinks lots of experiences are helpful in developing the cognitive functioning of our children. Let's go on to the next one.
Yes. So the next one is the director,
Hey.
planning and executing, like, party coordinators, travel guides.
Oh, that's you.
It's so me. Like,
That is just
people
that
can't
is you.
believe I actually get a lot of joy out of that.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't know
when we
what
went to
that.
Africa, I had a binder, I had everything printed, which saved our skin,
It
but
saved our backsides.
it wasn't a chore to me.
No,
I do enjoy that.
like planning multiple trips of ours you plan and you're like giddy like Christmas morning and
Yeah.
planning all the details and I'm like, what is wrong with
I
her?
have almost as much fun doing the planning as being on the trip.
Yeah, I love that because I don't like planning,
I know.
but you get joy from it.
Yeah.
And that's it's something to think about, like, oh, how do you support people in their joys even if
Yeah.
that's not yours? Like, you don't want me to help plan.
No.
I can give suggestions, and then I
I
have
like
to
your
hold them.
opinions on what you wanna do for fun, but
Yes.
then I'll book it. I'll
Yeah.
plan it.
And then once we do it, I can kind of be the jokester and having fun playing with people and getting to know people. Like,
Yeah.
I am
Then you'll
totally
fully enter it
comfortable
and you'll yeah.
riding up front, me and the taxi driver having a good old laugh, and you're just like, let's just get to the space.
I'm not a killjoy.
No, but you're also like, let's not do that anymore. The competitor.
I
This is our
wonder
family.
that it play to win, but also and I would say you're not a sore loser.
No.
Like, you really, really want to win,
Oh man, do I want
but
to win?
you're not the kind of person that, like, if they lose the game, you can't even live with them. You can't go home with them because 'cause they're
N-
so
No, the
upset.
process is
You're the
fun.
process. So that's the true play
Yeah.
in the competitiveness because you enjoy the process of being
And
competitive,
I care,
but you don't have to win in
but
order to have fun.
yeah, my identity isn't connected to
Yeah.
the outcome.
Yeah.
It's the
And
process.
that's a relief because if you were on that end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
that's rough. I find it hard when people are so tied to being the winner
Yeah.
that it's not fun for anybody else.
No. The only time I can remember one time when I had a problem with the competitor myself, and it
Yeah.
was playing football in high school. And it was, I felt I didn't do my best. I didn't even care about everybody else's performance or our outcome, but I didn't feel I played my
Yeah.
best. And I was a horrible, horrible person that evening. My folks had a party, people over, and I never came down. I was really sore, but it is
Yeah.
because
But it
the
also contributed to the team stuff, right? Would you
yeah.
say? Or is it all your
No,
individual
this was, I mean,
performance?
we lost, and so that didn't help, but it was I didn't do what I was capable of doing.
Mhm.
And so there's that's the shadow side of the competitor. Like, I love the process. I'm hardest on myself if I don't perform well.
Yeah.
Like playing cards, you and I playing cards. It's fine. If I make a mistake, I'm much more disgruntled than if you make a playing mistake as my partner.
Yeah.
And but it's fun to play, and it's fun to play different ways. Like we're playing cards and I'll bid without looking at
I
my
know, but
hand.
yeah, yeah, it was intimidating learning. I didn't grow up with card games, so it was intimidating joining your family where they
Yeah.
everybody takes it
Yeah.
seriously.
People want to
And
win.
I wouldn't say, you're ridiculed if you make a mistake, but it's noticed.
No, and it's usually like, so help me understand why you did that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, yeah.
And how can we learn from that?
Right. Yes, so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. All right.
All right,
So
that's a
that feels like
competitor.
I shared way too much of my own stuff.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean,
let's
that's
go on
fun.
to the
That's your
collector.
Yeah, so the next one is the collector, and I think
Yeah.
everybody knows somebody who collects something
Yeah.
and gets a great amount of joy from collecting things.
Yeah. I had a college roommate that collected baseball cards.
Mhm.
And loved to do that, and loved the, like, on the back are numbers on the cards. He loved to put them in numerical order and then just change and put them by team order. And it was just,
I'm sure you can lose yourself in time and
yeah,
space doing something like that. It's just outside of
yeah.
normal life.
And it's enjoyable ways of seeing different patterns.
I would
And
say you have a little bit of that in your family history collection.
yeah,
Like, you do get joy. It's not just for keeping records of family history. Like, you have spent hours, even when you've been really busy with grad school and stuff, doing the research and
mhm,
and getting joy out of and it taps into your competitive side
it
because
does. Can I find
you find this
something?
document that nobody knew about or
Mhm.
whatever, but you've got boxes of stuff that you've
Yeah.
collected that I think you seem to find a lot of joy
Yeah,
in.
I do. And I think it's the mystery storytelling. There's lots of components to that, but
Mhm.
the process of digging in and looking and I love old archives. I love going to the National Archives
Mhm.
and going to libraries and getting microfiche and microfilm and playing with the machines. All of that is
Yeah.
fun part
So the
of
whole
it. The
process
whole
part.
process. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and that part sounds like, oh, I
But see, that's how I feel about the planning,
I know,
right? It's
which is
that
good
the
for
planning process
yeah,
is what gives you joy. So
yeah,
it's interesting of finding those things that give you joy and not getting, I mean, we were playfully being judgmental, but we're just saying that's not my thing, but we support each other in it.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, 2 more. The artist creator, so, making or doing things creatively. I think I fall into this too. I do get a
Okay.
lot of joy in I did kind of marketing and public relations before I was a doula, and I still do that as a business owner,
Yeah.
having to create things, graphics and stuff like that. And I can lose a lot of time. And I used to make, family scrapbooks and stuff online. And I enjoy making something. I enjoy the process of making something that I find beautiful. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I can really lose myself in that.
Yeah. And as we talked in earlier episodes, I like putting together IKEA furniture.
You like building.
I like building, but I don't know about making.
No, I wouldn't say making or like designing.
No, no.
No, I like designing. You like
I
building.
leave that for you. It's kind
Yeah.
of like you, and your cooking is kind of making,
Yeah, I do
designing,
like to
creative.
bake and cook.
You've
Yeah.
moved from following recipes to kind of doing your own creative
Yeah.
piece and love it.
Yeah. And you get a good outcome because everybody loves to eat it.
Yeah. And then I get to do the process of doing the dishes, which I love.
Yeah, that's a good balance.
Yeah. We're,
Yeah, and then finally the storyteller. So somebody who uses their imagination um, in
yeah.
their play and loves to tell stories, loves to make up things, and that we talked about that in our childhoods.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of writers and
Yeah.
script
Writers.
writers, yeah,
Yeah. And
play people who are artists. I mean,
yeah.
actors and
Well, I think
stuff.
about my
Who,
brother Nathan
yeah,
of when he was younger doing make believe, when he was older doing acting. I think he's a really good storyteller and can kind of create
and inhabit
a
characters
character
and
out of nothing,
yeah,
and it's hilarious, but
yeah,
it's that creativity. Like he just has fun creating and building,
yeah.
but building in a ridiculous story most of the time.
Yeah, and I find that kind of brain fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of imagination, but I don't feel like mine goes as deeply as people who
Yeah.
can write these imaginative series of stories, and I love to watch that unfold.
Yeah, I hope that people can identify themselves. So we've tried to talk
Yeah,
a little bit, but these are hopefully you can identify yourself. And if you're not entering into these spaces, maybe this helps think about how can I be more playful
yeah.
if this is more of the type of adult player
Yeah.
that
Well,
I
that's the
am.
idea because I think we have a narrow definition of play. So when we say play is essential, you might be thinking, oh, I have to go outside and, throw a ball around, or, we kind of narrow that idea into something that maybe doesn't integrate well into our lives. And I think after hearing that list,
Yeah.
everybody probably identifies with something in there that they love to do. And we can just look for opportunities to do more of that.
Yeah.
Enter into that. Get into that place where you lose time
Yep.
and your brain goes into new pathways.
And invite others in, right?
Yes.
And invite them to have voluntary entering in.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
takeaway from our
Yeah.
time, but invite them in because I think we passively made bids for play. But what
Mhm.
if we attempted to make bids a little more directly,
Yeah.
of like, hey, let's do this or let's play, and it's exciting. I know that's the reason one of our kids got married. They met each other in a game night.
Yeah.
And so play is the
They still
center.
love board games. I
Yeah.
looked at their Christmas wish lists and they're all board games,
Yeah.
and
And it's the
they
center
met
of their
like
relationship. It's playful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they met like-minded people too. They have friends who love to play board games on a Friday night, and that's a nice way to escape.
Yeah, and I've learned there's like cooperative games now. So the research is being supported in the game. Like they play a game where everybody's working together to some kind of outcome, which blew my mind because I only know games as being
Where one
competitive.
person
Yeah,
wins.
and
Yeah.
everybody else loses. And so they've been teaching us these games where it's like let's all work together to do some outcome because it's the process of doing it together that's playful, and it's just it's
It is
fascinating to
fascinating,
see.
but it goes towards that sense of relationship building and togetherness.
Yeah.
But I did want to still kind of mention the dark side of play
Dun dun
because
dun.
because I think especially now that there's opportunity for people to be gaming in their room and not coming out for days or weeks, like there is a side of play where people might say, well, I'm doing everything you said and I'm doing an activity that I fully enjoy, but it might be that there's a way for that to be destructive
Yeah.
instead of fulfilling and helping you thrive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like the kind of properties of that where play is maybe or what we think of as play has become something else, or
Yeah.
when it leads to total isolation. So isolation is never really a part of what you want
Right.
with
And
play.
it's a poison that we've seen from COVID that the lack of thriving from being alone. Um, there can be a benefit of solitary play, but it
Yeah.
has to
And we all
be,
enjoy being alone and we
yeah,
should be sometimes, but
but it has to be
when it's
dosage,
right.
right? Like a small dose where then a lot of the other time we're relational beings and created for
I'm
relationship.
just giggling because I'm trying to remember if there's ever a time you've enjoyed being alone. Like,
No,
I don't
the
know.
answer is no.
So
Please don't leave me
that's not a
alone.
danger for you.
No,
It is a danger for
isolation.
me. I enjoyed COVID. I could be okay being alone for a while. Um,
Yeah, well, you just need a little quiet. Everybody can understand that listens to the podcast of like, yeah, we could all use some time away from David as
no, that's
well.
not the case. We actually had a lot of fun together, just not having our outside obligations too.
Yeah,
We never
yeah.
were completely
And we
alone.
got to learn different sides of each other from that time together.
We
So
did. Um,
The next da the next danger let's
yes.
move away from that.
Yeah, okay.
The next danger side or dark side of play is addiction, and I've had the opportunity to talk to lots of parents and lots of people all over the world of what do we do about this addictive type of isolation, gaming specifically, but phone, and I would
Yeah.
say it's not play, but it's repetitive things that
Mhm.
give you an escape and a dopamine hit
Yeah.
that make it then you need more of that to be okay, which play doesn't. Play's a long term, more serotonin type of thing
It's not as much of
where
a need as a want.
right, and
Yeah.
there's a joy rather than a high.
Mm.
And the addiction piece is I need this to survive or I need this to feel normal. And it ends up being an escape
Mhm.
rather than a powerful process. It
Mhm.
becomes the end. I do this because I get rather than I do this because I enjoy doing this.
Or I don't know what else to do, or,
Right.
like, I'm stuck in this cycle.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the gaming addiction, I don't think it's an addiction to play as much as it is to addiction and
Right.
outcome
It's when it may
spirals.
start out as play and
Yeah,
it gets into a different place.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So
think anything where that's the only thing that you're doing all the time is problematic, whether it's
yeah.
work or podcasting or gaming. But if
Yeah.
that's the only thing, then your life is narrowed down in such a way that there's not a fullness and flourishing that's needed in
Yeah.
terms of how we're created.
Yeah. It's taken on a new role. So another danger side of play is exclusionary interaction.
It's my ball. I'm going taking it and going home.
Well, I think it's even more than that.
Yeah,
Like, just kind of everybody else is cut off. So it's really like, I mean, I guess that goes with the isolation. But then also going into it becoming your identity.
yeah,
So play, by definition, is a voluntary thing that we enter into as an extra part of our lives to give us joy. If that thing becomes our identity,
yeah.
that we have to have it to even know who we are, I don't think it qualifies as play anymore.
Right. And that was the dark side of, or the shadow side of the competitor, right? Of like,
Mhm.
I have to win.
Yeah.
The exclusionary, this is only enjoyable. And it's kind of like people that find gambling a piece of play.
Yeah.
It's, well, if you're doing it, it's enjoyable. But if it's like, I have to do this, there's a compulsion,
Mhm.
is the exclusionary, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah, so,
danger.
I mean, it's not fun to go to the dark side, but I think it's fair to just say, there's with anything that's good, there can be another side to it if it
Yeah.
goes in a different direction.
Too
So, it
much or
yeah,
using it in a way that avoids relationship, I think is by definition
right.
for us being with you. That if it pulls you away from the process of being together,
Mhm.
it's problem,
Or cuts you off or becomes
right?
the thing that you need.
The thing.
Yeah.
So what hampers play from happening? I mean, we've kind of talked around that a little bit, but like what for you, what is that little niggle in your head of like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
should do this.
I mean, I think in general, it's time restrictions.
Yeah.
In general, the thing that keeps me from playing enough is I just feel burdened by the things I have to do and don't feel free to have time to do the things I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing for adults and play is just feeling like we have to have outcomes, we have to have purposeful activity, we have to um tell each other how busy we are, and we
Yeah.
get in that cycle like we talked about with the kids and our schedules, and you can just get so caught up in it that feels like you're stuck there and it's hard to break out of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that mostly holds me back, and that's just talking about recreational activities mostly
Yeah.
because to be playful, it just in communication and stuff doesn't
Mhm.
require time.
No.
It just can happen, but it also can be restricted by just the burden of responsibility and the to-do list and what's clicking in the back.
Yeah, and I think a lot of shoulds, right?
Mhm.
Like you should be an adult, you should be mature. All the things people say to me all the time. I think there's that constrictor that, oh, playfulness is silliness, playfulness is
Mhm.
immaturity,
Yeah.
rather than
That's what
it's
people think too, the immaturity piece,
yeah.
like
And
yeah.
if you let that marinate in your head as a voice that's speaking to you, it quashes the playfulness. And as we saw, there's benefits to being playful. We didn't even talk about some of the research from the World Health Organization in terms of playfulness and the attitude of playfulness and how that leads to human flourishing. And so these messages of seriousness and kind of not being childlike actually work against our flourishing as adults.
I think the other as you say that, I'm thinking another big inhibitor for us as adults, for most people, is the fear of how people are gonna respond.
Yeah, the
It's
social
like
stigma.
because sometimes people don't find that amusing, however you're deciding to play.
Yeah,
And you seem to be free from worrying about how people respond, and usually, I think if you carry that playfulness confidently, it
yeah,
usually breeds more playfulness in response. But I think that can really hold people back is worrying like, are people just going to think I'm silly or am I going to, you know,
yeah,
I'm not good at telling jokes or lightening the mood, like, and just trying to, I think it maybe takes a little bit of practice and like
yeah. And I
feeling
think
okay with,
what we're talking about here too of like the purpose, it's not purposeless, it's not silliness, it's actually meaningful. Even like with our daughter, like I like playing with her to see how hard I can get her to roll her eyes at me,
well,
in
when she
terms
was a
of,
teenager.
yeah, in terms of just using kind of the Gen Z words that I'm learning, like skibbity toilet uh and all those things, I don't know, but
Yeah, she,
but it's nonsense to kind of get a reaction. Then we can kind of play around that.
yeah.
In and of itself, it's nothing, and it is silliness, but it's used to build a relationship
Hmm.
and to interact, and invitation to like her rolling her eyes. I don't take personally as contempt. I see
No.
it
Well, and
as
and you're reading the room too because she does respond that way, but also playfully. She's not
yeah,
truthfully like just flat out embarrassed or
no.
angry. It's just kind of like, "Oh my gosh, don't do that. Don't say that."
And I remind her she's the one that's taught me those words.
That's right. That's right.
So,
And it becomes a
a
dance.
mutual thing.
Yeah.
So, well, I think what our takeaway from today is playfulness is purposeful. It's voluntary. It builds up our bodies, our minds, our spirit, and but we have to look for opportunities to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we encourage everybody. I'm growing in that area.
She is.
And we encourage people to look for it because it doesn't always just come your way. You
Yeah.
have to make space for play.
Yeah.
And so look for ways to find that joy and to change the patterns and have a little fun.
Yeah, and you can do that with us by liking and reviewing and
Subscribing.
subscribing and sending messages to us. We would love to play. And so here's our bid to play with you. Please voluntarily enter in to play with us. Have a good day.